Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are test driving a 2024 Mazda CX-90. This is the standard 3.3 liter straight six mild hybrid. It is not the plug-in hybrid. It has a rearward biased all-wheel drive system, so it actually defaults to sending the power to the rear as opposed to most modern crossover SUVs that default to sending the power to the front. I would consider this a crossover SUV because it is a sport utility vehicle built on a car chassis. The last three Mazdas that I have driven, I have absolutely loved. Drove a fully loaded Mazda 3 hatchback with the 2.5 liter turbo engine that was fantastic. I drove a base model CX-5 that I thought was great, and I've driven a CX-30, which I was also very impressed with. And I recently, a couple of weeks ago, drove a new Toyota Grand Highlander Hybrid Max that I was extremely impressed with, specifically with how it drove. That was surprising to me. And so I was actually expecting, I was like, if any car in the class is going to drive better than that Hybrid Max Grand Highlander, it's got to be the CX-90. And I am disappointed to report that it doesn't. This car drives fine, but the chassis refinement isn't quite there. For what I would expect from Mazda. There's a little bit more body roll, even in a large vehicle. You know, some body roll is to be expected, but the reason why car journalists and nerds who strap GoPro cameras to their heads and film themselves and put it on YouTube driving a car around freak out about Mazdas is because they handle so well, and they feel like, even like a base model CX-5, it felt like it had a sports car in its DNA, and this just doesn't. And I think that for a lot of manufacturers, you can pick one car in their lineup and say that's what they do. That's where they put their heart and soul. Examples I give: for Mercedes-Benz, it would be the S-Class sedan. For Porsche, it would be the 911. For Mazda, honestly, I think it's the MX-5. That is where their heart and soul is, and that translates well into a Mazda 3, a Mazda CX-30, a Mazda CX-5, because those cars are not, they can get away with making them not that big. And what they've tried to do with this one is go a little bit more mainstream, and it's not what Mazda does. Mazda's cars are always a little bit smaller than they should be and drive better than they should and look nicer than they should. And this car's like none of those things. And I give Mazda, you know, obviously when you're in this class, the car needs to have a lot of usable room, and this car has that. But I am disappointed with how it drives. I'm disappointed in the level of equipment. This is like a $47,000 MSRP car. It doesn't have factory navigation. You could put a chip in it to give it that, but as it sits, it doesn't have it. It doesn't have a panoramic moonroof. It doesn't have you got to do this at night with the rear view mirror, you know? So I hate to say it, but overall I'm disappointed in this car. And normally I love Mazdas, and you know, the Highlander Platinum Hybrid Max that I drove was like 12 grand more MSRP than this. So yeah, significant amounts of money, and I'm sure a Toyota dealer, at least the ones in Southern California, are probably marking that up more than any Mazda dealer's marking up a CX-90, if they're marking them up at all. I honestly don't know what the market is on this car right now. So I could sit here, it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh my goodness, the Grand Highlander Platinum was a way better car. and it was nicer to drive, and it had more equipment, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm right in all that stuff, but there is a significant budgetary budgetary concern there, budgetary consideration, because it was so much more expensive and you would have to pay so much more money for it. But with that being said, you know, you could get a Subaru Ascent for the same money as this with more equipment. And, you know, there's other cars in the market to consider. So, you know, this wouldn't be the one that I would spend my money on. And the straight six engine, these fine people in front of me are making it so that I can't really exercise it too much here. But the straight six engine it's cool that it's a straight six, but it's really not that powerful. It's kind of an interesting thing. It's 3.3 liters. It's nice and smooth, but it's only got like 280 horsepower, and then the mild hybrid, the small electric motor and battery pack gives it a little more power. I will say it's extremely efficient. I did my fuel economy test with it last night, and it handily beat its EPA estimate, and it certainly beat the Toyota Grand Highlander with the Hybrid Max powertrain, but the Hybrid Max powertrain does have more power and certainly was faster. But I like this engine, but I don't love it. I was expecting to be awed, shock and awe, and I'm just not. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe my expectations were too high based on previous Mazda models that I've driven, and quite frankly, based on how good that Grand Highlander was that I drove recently. But, you know, maybe that's the car. Maybe it is worth another 12 grand. We're doing about 70. So there's a refinement check for you. It is pretty refined. The ride is a little bit firm. Let's see. Yeah, and I have a normal mode, a sport mode, and an off-road mode. And I'm just in normal mode. Let's see if I put it in sport. Oh, feel the power. For how, I don't want to say jittery, but the ride is firm. For how firm the ride is in a Mazda, the handling should be better. That's what I mean when I say the chassis refinement is not there. Give me a trade-off. If I'm going to have this kind of body roll, I want a smoother ride. I don't want those abrupt jolts that I feel. And it's not, you know, is it going to make the baby cry? Probably not. You know, it's fine, but just within the class, I mean, a Subaru Ascent rides smoother than this, and the Ascent originally came out in 2019. A Subaru Ascent might handle better than this too. And it's not bad, it's just not great. And it's not as good as I expected it to be, and I think that's why I'm disappointed. I don't know. This just isn't Mazda's bag. They like making smaller cars, and that's what they're best at. And so, unfortunately, I would have to rank this relatively low amongst large SUVs when, you know, amongst mainstream compact SUVs, the CX-5, and I haven't driven a CX-50. I know the CX-50 is the more off-road oriented one, and it's a little more bulky looking. The CX-5 was probably my favorite out of even the new CR-V, the new RAV4. Like, the CX-5 just drives so nicely that it's probably my favorite. The CX-30 is definitely my favorite out of all the teeny tiny SUVs that I've driven. The Mazda 3 hatchback, what was that thing? A Premium Plus Turbo? Whatever the $35,000 fully loaded one was. I spent 3 days with that, and I was like, man, I could buy one of these. That car was just a touch too small. I ended up with an Acura Integra A-Spec Tech with a stick shift for a few reasons, but I mean, I loved that Mazda 3 a lot. It was just gorgeous and drove great and everything else and really felt like a premium product. But this just isn't it. Things I like about it: the heads-up display is great on a Mazda. It gives you data for the safety systems. This car doesn't have nav, but if you have the Apple CarPlay active, it'll tell you your next turn, and it'll also tell you, it kind of gives you blind spot monitoring information. What else do I like about this car? Yeah, I guess I don't really like this car. I'm sorry. If you bought one of these, put in the comments why I'm wrong if you haven't done already. But yeah, I don't... It's kind of a disappointment, honestly. This, for 47 grand in a Mazda, is unacceptable. That's unacceptable. The little Mazda dial is livable, but oh man, manufacturers, please, touchscreens. Let's get rid of the dials. Let's get rid of the touch pads. Let's get rid of all of it. You know, especially with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay becoming so prevalent. Touchscreen, touchscreen, touchscreen. Let's focus on that idea. And I mean, this is uphill, but you know, doesn't have big power. I will say that I would guess this straight six engine will last a long time because it's very, very under-stressed. The output level is relatively low for the fact that it's turbocharged and 3.3 liters. It's not even making 100 horsepower per liter. When most modern turbo engines make at least that. So it'll probably last a long time mechanically. That's a good thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Mazda CX-90. If they're sold out of all the other 3-row SUVs, I guess buy one of these if you have to have one. Good night.